What's up, y'all? It's day 13. I'm feeling good because I got my hair laid and I got my eyebrows done, so I'm feeling quite nice in the face, you know what I'm saying? So it's day 13, and on day 13, this came up in a coaching conversation this week, so I thought, if my client's thinking about this, and I've thought about this, I'm sure other people have thought about this too. And so what we're going to think about is about time, the truth about time. And the question that came up was, what she wanted to unpack was like, am I running out of time? And we unpacked that a lot. And I'll weave that story into what we're going to talk about today. But I'm sure some of y'all felt like that, right? Like, am I running out of time? Do I have enough time? Am I doing all the things that I can with the time that I have? And it creeps up on me too. Sometimes I'm like, I get that feeling, that sense of urgency, and I question myself. Am I where I thought I would be? Those kinds of questions. And then I pause for a second, and then I say, which is my like mantra that kind of keeps me grounded, is like the divine is always on time, right? I'm right where I need to be, where I'm supposed to be, based on all the decisions that I've made and based on my current consciousness. So I am right on time. And usually that settles everything, right? Because, obviously things could always be different, right? But we're at our own pace and we need to honor our pace. Welcome if you just joined us. We're just talking about time and what it means to what does that mean, time, for all of us? Like, it means something different for everybody. And I just want to dissect that a little bit. And hopefully in the process, maybe you'll gain a new reframe about time, right? And one of the questions that I had was like, what was time invented? Like, who invented time? Like, how did that go about? Because back in the day, people used to rise with the sun and just sleep with the sun. But now we have this thing called time. And of all the countries that I've been to, a lot of countries don't really follow that kind of speed. I'm not saying they don't have time. Obviously they do. But they don't have that sense of urgency that I would feel being in the States. I remember living in Thailand, and I passed by this cafe. I had a little chalkboard stand thing that would let us know when it's open. And it said on the sign, I was like trying to figure out, like, when is it open? I'm like, I want to check it out. Sometime in the morning is what it said. Sometime in the morning. And most of Thailand, their pace is so slow. And it was a real adjustment for me, coming from like a go, 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 burnout kind of mentality where my nervous system was hijacked. Hey, babe. My nervous system was hijacked. So for me to adjust to their pace, where they're just lax about so many things, and was hard. And there are times where I'm a bit lax, but I noticed this trend in a lot of the countries that I visited. We noticed this trend in Spain. Spain is not rushing for nobody. They eat dinner late, and they're parlaying with their friends all day, all night long. They take breaks. I remember me and my partner went to this cafe. And it was some of the tables, because we were trying to work. Americans got to do some work. And they had like a no laptop policy in some of the tables and certain days. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Even traveling through Central America, everybody's just chilling. The only time where I noticed time was of the essence was living in Japan. Because Japan is a very interesting place. I love my time there, but I noticed I had gotten this side hustle where I was teaching Japanese businessmen English, and I would take the train about an hour away. And when the train was late, you could actually go to the information booth and get an apology letter, like apology note, like from school, right? Please excuse Bob being late to work. I was like, wow, that is so interesting, right? And so, different countries have their different perspectives of time. And so I had asked that question, and I didn't go down the rabbit hole about this. I'm sure there's lots of angles and conspiracy theories behind the idea of time. But what I realized was like, okay, if we just look at the basics, time was invented for us to comply, right? To know when to clock in, to know when to clock out, to know when to have lunch, to work, and to be workers, to be worker bees. And I'm not knocking the 9 to 5 or anything like that. And, if that is your lifestyle, then yeah, time is of the essence for you, right? Time plays a major role, right? But I realized, and I pulled up this article on The Atlantic, and I was just kind of skimming through it about time. And it said time reform was really defined through Western terms. And the reason why it was defined and it became something that they imposed was because it was developed to suit the interests and assumptions of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people, right? Because that synchronization was easier for the European elites to sort of project their influence and to sell their goods. So it helped them to make lots of money, right? And I remember thinking, because I used to be somebody that's really like, I used to be late all the time, all the time. Just like time was just not a thing for me. And I thought I would get better with time. I wanted to be more on time. But then I realized I didn't like how it made me feel, like being in almost like running late and, dodging traffic and all those things. And so I had to adjust my lifestyle so that I wouldn't have to worry about time in that sense. And it was interesting because this week I took my cousin to work. She's a nurse. And she had gotten up and I heard her like kind of like going off on the phone. And she had some sort of, they call it assignment. And no one told her about it. And so she's kind of rushing out the door. She didn't make no breakfast, nothing. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this when somebody else hijacks your time. So I'm sitting in the car and she's kind of like frazzled and irritable. And she's kind of rushing a little bit. And I'm like, well, you're already late. So just let it go. At this point, let it go. And especially if somebody else makes a mistake, then the idea is like not to be bound by that person's mistake, that person's error. Like, you ain't gonna rush me now because you did something, right? I'm not gonna feed into your hurriedness because then that's gonna disrupt my process, right? And that happens to a lot of us where we get caught up in other people's emergencies, right? So we have to be very mindful about how people pull us into their own anxiety, their own slip-ups, and all of that stuff. And so the current time frame that we're in is the Newtonian paradigm, right? And then in the Newtonian paradigm, it says that we only have a finite amount of time. And because we have a finite amount of time, that we must be very careful of how we use that time. And, I'm half and half on this, right? I don't believe that we have a finite amount of time, and I'll explain that later. But I do believe that we need to be mindful, not careful, because when you say careful, you're coming from a fear-based mentality. And you know me, I try to stay away from that, and I invite you to do the same. But when I think of time, I also think of energy, my energy levels, right? So sure, we have to be mindful about how we use our time, because on an energetic level, there are things out there that can suck our energy dry. And there are things out there that can actually replenish our energy levels, right? What's going on, Tiara? And so in that sense, we do have to be mindful about that. But sometimes when we're asking the question, am I running out of time? To me, that's more of a spiritual question. It's asking, and I did a live yesterday about like self-reflection. And one of the questions was like, have I done anything meaningful lately? And so as I sort of talked with my client about this, the real question as we sort of got deeper was more along the lines of like, have I learned all the things that I needed to learn in this lifetime to help sort of evolve or move the needle forward? Am I contributing as much as I can in this lifetime? Am I feeling useful? Right? So it's not necessarily about running out of time, right? It's about meaning and what that meaning is for you. And because when you think about time, it's like, we've been programmed to believe that time is about scarcity. And because of that scarcity, it's going to make us very uncomfortable. And so in this book, I don't know if I mentioned that, I got a lot of this from this book called The Big Leap. If you want a copy of it, let me know. I have a PDF of it. Because he really breaks this down really nicely. And so I pulled some of the highlights from that. And he said that, if you continuously think that time is scarce, you're going to always be owned by time. It's almost like thinking, if you don't have enough food, you're always going to be hungry, right? And so you're always looking for food because, it's like bugs out here, child. You're always going to be looking for it because you're always going to watch the clock because you're always thinking you're going to be running out of something, right? And so in the book, he says that we have been deluded to believe that time is somehow outside of us, that we cannot control it, and that and when we think of it that way, we become a slave to time. And so we either can become a victim to time, where we think that time is working against us, or we become the victor of time, where we think time is working for us. So you can see how you can go in and out of that loop as much as you think that or believe that time is outside of yourself, right? And so that scarcity mindset helps you to maintain a level of anxiety, right? And sometimes that anxiety can be quite crippling because it could make you feel like you're frozen, you're stuck in time. And so often you hear, the hippies, they say time is a construct, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot going on in my house, child. I had to come out here. So, anyway, who said third world, you're on your own time? Yeah, we're going to talk about that, how you are on your own time. Hi, just doing a live.
You doing a live?
Yeah.
Can I say hi?
Sure.
Huh?
If you want to say hi. Yo, my cousin wants to say hi,
You don't have
child.
to lock it. My cousin's right there.
You can't really see anybody.
Oh, really?
She's kind of old school.
Undo it. So she won't get locked out because she's not in.
You won't see anybody. It's just they're just gonna look at you. They're in
Hey,
that
guys.
chat. That's my cousin.
How are ya?
Stanya, guys. We're talking about time. Well, surprise. Okay. Let's see. Get back on track. All right. So he says that as long as you believe time is outside of yourself, you're always going to be a slave to time. And in the book, he says that you are the source of time. And he says that because you are the source of time, you can make as much of it as you want. And that's trippy, okay? It is a bit trippy. And that concept comes from Einstein time. And so right now we're in the Newtonian time frame. Babe's laughing. Right now we're in the Newtonian paradigm, where we think it's finite. And so this invitation is to think of this Einstein time. And you could, you can go crazy and go down the rabbit hole about this. But when you become the source of time, it means that now you are occupying the space, right? And so this is an example. You're hanging out with a loved one, and you could either keep looking at the clock, or you can occupy the space and the time that you're spending with that loved one. So think about it. So it comes down to being present and mindfulness, right? And so you want to give yourself the opportunity to relax into that space. And that when you're giving yourself the opportunity to relax in that space, your consciousness expands. Because if you are constantly, watching the clock, you can feel that kind of restriction. Right? I have a limited time to do this. I have a limited time to do that. And you're constantly moving forward or back, but you're never here. And so that hurriedness is going to impede you and actually slows you down, truth be told, right? And so there's this idea that you're everywhere all at once. I don't know if everyone's seen this movie. My sister put me onto it. I think it's everything, everywhere, all at once. It's actually a really good movie, and it has a lot of layers that you can dissect about spirituality inner child stuff in such a funny way, but I recommend it highly. But anyway, so it says, as you give yourself the opportunity to relax into this space, your consciousness expands and time basically disappears. You ever notice that? And this is true because when you're doing something that you wholeheartedly love, like you're so into it, you lose a sense of time. Like it doesn't even exist. Like when I travel, most of the time I don't even know what day it is. and you could I actually saw somebody's on Instagram, they actually mentioned this too. They were like, I missed the days when I was in Mexico and I didn't know what day it was. You don't even know what day it is. And how freeing it is to allow yourself to just totally enjoy that moment. And I know how difficult it is because not everyone is at a place where they can not know what day it is. So I get that, right? But if that's a sort of lifestyle that you want to create for yourself, then definitely, figure out, create a plan to do that. But when you're enjoying that moment, you know that there's no place to go and there's no place else to be except here. And so I started to think about, and there are times I'm on my way to do something, and like the other day I had to go pick my cousin up at work, and there was a detour. I had to figure out this detour. I got lost. I was late, all this stuff, right? And I found myself getting a little bit frustrated about it. But then I realized sometimes these detours, like we're trying to get somewhere and then it doesn't happen. I always say that's the divine playing in the background, doing something in the background, because maybe I wasn't supposed to be somewhere at that time. So I never really, at this point in my life, I never question when things don't go quote unquote right, or as I thought I wanted to, based on my personal expectations, because I believe that usually the divine is protecting me from something, right? It's diverting me from a place that I don't need to be. And so I've really came to a place to accept that where I was supposed to be, or where I thought I was supposed to be, wasn't meant for me to be there. I hope that makes sense. It's a little esoteric, but I stopped fighting with that. I started to just allow things to be. Exactly. Flow. All flow. Because when you start to move from a place of flow, there's less resistance, right? There's less internal conflict or external conflict, and you can literally really ride the waves in your life. And so when we switch to Einstein time, what that means is that we can begin to take charge of the amount of time that we have. And we start to understand that time comes truly from us, and it comes from within. It comes from how we're occupying our space, what we're doing with that space, or what we're not doing with that space, right? And so this is an invitation for you to sort of find a way for time not to own you, but for you to own time. And the reason this is so important is because it might come back down to what's out of alignment in your life. Are you lacking meaning in certain areas of your life, which is making you feel like you're running out of time? How are you using the time that you have, right? And one of the things that we had to come to a conclusion with during my coaching call was she had to understand that, because she believes that, which is what I believe too, but everybody has a different belief, is that we are infinite beings. If we are made of energy, we cannot be destroyed, right? So when this body falls, I'm only going to be transformed. And if I'm an infinite being and my consciousness continues to live on, then I'm not here to learn everything that I need to learn, right? I need to be okay with not learning everything I need to learn. I need to be okay with learning what I need to learn at my own pace. And not, like I said earlier, at my level of consciousness, based on where I'm at, right? Based on all the decisions that I've made, and just allow that process. What's going on, Sandra? And allow that process to take place, right? Because you ever notice, even once you learn something, there's something else to learn. Once you sort of level up your consciousness in certain ways, and what I mean by leveling up your consciousness, all I basically mean is once you gain the self-awareness of something, and then you actually change it, and then you grow. That's all I'm saying when I say about leveling up your consciousness. Buying my own time in scarcity. Tell me a little bit more about that. So we are in an endless world of information, and so there is no possibility that we can learn everything that we need to learn, but we need to learn what it is we need to learn. If that makes sense, like based on what our journey is teaching us, because we don't need to know everything. We just need to know the things that we need to know so that we can evolve. Like I don't necessarily need to know what's going on with Susie next door, unless somehow our paths need to cross for a particular reason, for some sort of mutual exchange, or maybe I need to learn something from Susie, or Susie needs to learn something from me. But other than that, I can just focus on myself, right? And so I truly believe that's really how it works. So the question is, what are you doing with your time? And are you feeling very satisfied with how your time is being currently used? And if not, are there things that you can change? Because if you are working the 9 to 5, it's all good. But like even on the weekends, like what can you do to feel like you are in the flow? How can you add more flow into your life? And even on a daily basis, because it's not necessarily about like 9 to 5, but like how are you reacting to time that is outside of yourself? How are you sort of embodying the space that you're in? Because when you are constantly present, and you're not always going to get it right, I don't always get it right, but when you have that moment where you're present, you won't get taken out of that time and space. And so the less that you're taking out of that time and space, the less that you're going to think that you're running out of time. I hope that makes sense. And so the more that you do that, the more your relationship with time transforms. And then the more that you dip into what meaningful events or relationships that you can have in your life, the less you think about time. At this point, time is really irrelevant, right? Because it's all about the connections, the meaning that you're deriving from the time and space that you're currently occupying. I hope that makes sense. So my invitation to you, I already gave it to you. If there's no other questions, thank you for watching as always. And I hope this was helpful. And I will see y'all tomorrow for day 14. Thank you for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.